You're too soft to make it on your own. My name is Connor. I'm 42 years old, and I've spent the last 16 years married to a woman who stopped seeing me as a man somewhere along the way. I worked in commercial real estate appraisal, steady work, decent money, nothing flashy. But to her, steady meant weak. We sat in the kitchen that night. She leaned against the counter with her arms crossed, staring at me like I was a disappointment she'd been carrying around too long. I just suggested we take a weekend trip, something simple to reconnect. Her response was that line, too soft. I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I just sat there with my coffee getting cold, wondering when exactly I'd become invisible to her. It wasn't the first time she'd said something like that. Over the years, there'd been 100 small cuts. The way she'd roll her eyes when I chose compromise over confrontation. The tone she used when explaining things to me, like I was slow. The way she'd interrupt me at dinners with friends, finishing my sentences with something sharper, funnier, more decisive than whatever I was going to say. She worked in marketing at a tech startup downtown. Long hours, high pressure, lots of talk about disruption and innovation. I respected the work, but somewhere in there she started believing that aggressive meant strong and patient meant spineless. I looked at her standing there, waiting for me to apologize or defend myself. Instead, I thought about the previous weekend. I'd spent Saturday fixing the deck she'd been complaining about for months. Sunday, I'd driven 3 hours to help her sister move furniture. When I got home, she was on the couch with her laptop, barely looked up. "You hear me?" she said. "I heard you." She shook her head and walked out of the room. I sat there alone, staring at the scratches on the kitchen table from when we'd first moved in, back when we still liked each other. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the years in my head, the late nights I'd worked to help pay off her student loans, the times I'd covered her mistakes without making her feel small, the 1,000 ways I'd tried to be solid ground for her. And what I got in return was contempt. I got up around 2 in the morning and stood in the hallway outside our bedroom. Through the door, I could hear her breathing, steady and unbothered. It occurred to me then that she'd probably sleep just fine if I disappeared tomorrow. The thought didn't make me angry. It made me clear-headed. We'd met in college, both of us 23 and figuring things out. She was ambitious, driven, always 3 steps ahead in every conversation. I liked that about her. I was more measured, the kind of person who thought things through before jumping. She used to say we balanced each other out. The first few years of marriage were good. We bought a small house in Minneapolis, fixed it up together, talked about kids someday. I worked my way up in appraisal, got my certifications, built a reputation for being thorough and fair. She bounced between jobs, chasing the next big opportunity. I supported every move, every pivot, every late-night work crisis that meant I'd be eating dinner alone again. Her career took off about 5 years in. Suddenly she was traveling for conferences, networking with people who used words like synergy and leverage without irony. I was happy for her, proud even. But something shifted. She started looking at me differently, like I was a relic from a simpler time she'd outgrown. My brother noticed it before I did. He pulled me aside at a family barbecue 2 years ago and asked if everything was okay at home. I told him it was fine, just busy. He didn't look convinced, but he let it go. The cracks started showing in small ways. She'd make plans without telling me, then act annoyed when I had a conflict. She'd talk about her coworkers constantly, how smart they were, how driven, how they didn't settle for mediocrity. I never asked if she was comparing them to me, but the answer was in her tone. Money became a weapon. We made about the same amount, but she acted like hers mattered more because it came from a dynamic company. When I suggested we invest in a rental property, something I knew inside and out, she dismissed it as too slow, too boring. Instead, she wanted to dump everything into some crypto venture her boss was excited about. I said no. She called me risk-averse. I thought about my parents sometimes. My dad worked at a lumberyard for 40 years, came home tired but steady. My mom taught second grade and baked bread on Sundays. They weren't flashy people, but they were solid. They built something that lasted. I wanted that, but my wife wanted something else. She wanted excitement, validation, proof that she was exceptional. And I wasn't part of that story anymore. The weekend before she said I was too soft, I'd asked her to go for a walk with me. Just around the neighborhood, no agenda. She said she had emails to catch up on. I went alone. It was the first time I realized I preferred it that way. The morning after she called me soft, I woke up with a strange kind of clarity. The hurt was still there, but underneath it was something colder, sharper. I wasn't angry. I was done. I got dressed, made coffee, and started moving through the house like I was taking inventory. 16 years of shared space, and most of it felt like hers. The furniture she'd picked out, the art on the walls, the books on the shelves. I'd adapted to all of it, made myself smaller to fit into her vision of what our life should look like. She came downstairs around 8, already on her phone. She poured coffee without looking at me, scrolled through emails while standing at the counter. It was like I wasn't even there. "I'm leaving," I said. She glanced up barely. "What?" "I'm moving out." That got her attention. She set her phone down, stared at me like I'd just said something in a foreign language. "What are you talking about?" "I'm done," I said. "I'll stay with my brother until I figure out the next step." Her face shifted from confusion to irritation. "You're being dramatic." "I'm not." "Connor, come on. I said one thing, and you're going to blow up our entire life over it?" "One thing," I repeated. "Right." She crossed her arms, leaned back against the counter. "So what? You're going to run away because I hurt your feelings?" There it was. The dismissal, the belittling, the assumption that my reaction was the problem, not her years of contempt. "I'm not running," I said. "I'm choosing myself." She laughed, but it was forced. "Okay, fine. Go stay at your brother's for a few days. Clear your head. But don't act like this is some big statement." I didn't respond. I just went upstairs, packed a bag with clothes, my laptop, and a few things I cared about. When I came back down, she was still in the kitchen, staring at her phone like nothing had happened. I walked past her, opened the front door, and stopped. For a second, I thought she might say something. Apologize, ask me to stay, acknowledge that maybe she'd pushed too far, but she didn't. I loaded my bag into the car, sat behind the wheel, and looked back at the house. It was a nice house. We'd painted the trim together, planted flowers in the front yard, hosted dinners with friends who probably wondered how we'd ended up together in the first place. I pulled out of the driveway and didn't look back again. My brother lived 20 minutes away. I called him on the way, told him I needed a place to crash. He didn't ask questions, just said the guest room was mine as long as I needed it. When I got there, I felt lighter than I had in years. The first week at my brother's place was quiet. He worked construction, left early, came home tired. We'd eat dinner together, watch whatever game was on, and he'd give me space to think. He didn't push me to talk, didn't offer advice unless I asked. It was exactly what I needed. My wife called twice the first day. I didn't answer. She left voicemails. First one was defensive, saying I was overreacting, that we could work through this if I stopped being so sensitive. The second was angrier, accusing me of abandoning her without even trying to fix things. I texted her once, "I need time. I'll reach out when I'm ready." She responded immediately, "This is childish." I didn't reply. By the end of the first week, she shifted tactics. She called my brother, asked if I was okay, said she was worried about me. He told her I was fine, and that maybe she should give me the space I asked for. She didn't like that. She started texting me about logistics, bills, the mortgage, things that needed to be handled. I responded to those, kept it brief, factual. She tried to turn every conversation into something bigger, but I didn't take the bait. At work, I kept my head down. My boss noticed something was off, asked if everything was okay at home. I told him I was dealing with some personal things, but that it wouldn't affect my work. He nodded, left it alone. I started going through our finances in the evenings. We'd always kept separate accounts for day-to-day stuff, but we had a joint savings account and shared ownership of the house. I pulled up statements, old emails, documents I'd filed away over the years. I wanted to understand exactly where I stood if this turned into something permanent. What I found surprised me. We'd been putting money into that savings account for years, but over the last 18 months, there'd been a series of withdrawals. Not huge amounts, but regular. 1,000 here, 1,500 there. I didn't remember us discussing any of it. I called the bank, asked for a full transaction history. When the statement came through, I saw her name on every withdrawal. She'd been pulling money out and never mentioned it. I didn't confront her right away. I just sat with it, trying to figure out what it meant. Maybe she'd been covering expenses I didn't know about. Maybe she'd been planning something and didn't want to involve me. Or maybe she'd been preparing for this longer than I realized. 2 weeks in, she showed up at my brother's place. He was at work, and I was sitting on the porch with a beer when her car pulled up. She got out, walked up the driveway like she was visiting a sick relative. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You've made your point. Come home." "I'm not coming home." "Connor, stop, you're being stubborn." "I'm being clear." She crossed her arms, looked at me like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. "What do you want from me, an apology?" "Fine. I'm sorry I said you're soft. Happy?" "It's not about one thing you said." "Then what is it about?" I stood up, looked at her straight on. "It's about the fact that you don't respect me. Haven't for a long time. And I'm not going to keep pretending that's okay." Her face hardened. "So that's it? You're just giving up?" "No," I said. "I'm finally choosing something better." She stood there for a moment, waiting for me to change my mind. When I didn't, she turned around, got in her car, and left. A month after I moved out, I started looking at my life differently. Not just what I'd lost, but what I'd been avoiding. I'd spent years being the steady one, the reliable one, the guy who kept things running while everyone else chased their ambitions. And I'd convinced myself that was enough. But it wasn't. I'd always been interested in real estate beyond appraisal. I understood property value, market trends, financing structures. I knew how to read a deal, spot potential, see what others missed. But I'd never acted on it, never took the risk. My wife used to call that cautiousness. My brother called it patience. I started looking at properties, small commercial spaces, buildings with good bones but bad management, places that needed someone with vision and follow-through. I spent evenings running numbers, talking to brokers, learning the financing side of things I'd only observed from a distance. There was a building downtown that caught my attention. 3 stories, built in the 80s, currently leased to a mix of small businesses and a nonprofit. The owner was older, looking to sell, tired of dealing with tenant issues and maintenance. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. Good location, steady income, room to improve. I called the broker, set up a walkthrough. The place needed work, new HVAC, updated electrical, cosmetic fixes. But the foundation was sound. I could see what it could become. The asking price was higher than I could afford on my own, but I had options. I had savings, equity in the house, and a clean credit history. I started talking to lenders, putting together a proposal. My brother thought I was crazy. "You're in the middle of a separation and you're trying to buy a building?" "I'm in the middle of figuring out who I am without her," I said. "This is part of it." He didn't argue after that. I kept working, kept saving, kept moving forward. I didn't talk to my wife about any of it. We were communicating through a mediator now, working out the details of the separation. She wanted to keep the house, buy me out. I agreed. I didn't want to be tied to that place anymore. During one of the mediation sessions, she asked what I was planning to do with my share of the equity. I told her I was investing it. She smirked, said something about me finally taking a risk. I didn't respond. 3 months after I moved out, I closed on the building. It took everything I had: savings, the buyout from the house, a loan that made my stomach turn when I signed the papers. But it was mine. I stood in the lobby on my first day as the owner, looked around at the scuffed floors and outdated fixtures, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: pride. I got to work. I hired a contractor I trusted, prioritized the repairs that mattered, and started building relationships with the tenants. I wasn't trying to flip the place or turn it into something trendy. I just wanted to run it well, make it a space people wanted to be in. My wife found out about it through mutual friends. She called me, demanded to know why I hadn't told her. I said it wasn't her business anymore. She hung up. I didn't care. I was done trying to justify myself to someone who'd already decided I wasn't enough. For the first time in a long time, I was building something that was entirely mine. By the 5th month, the building was coming together. The HVAC was replaced, the electrical upgraded, the common areas repainted. I'd renegotiated leases with tenants who'd been paying under market rate for years, not by gouging them, but by offering fair terms with actual maintenance and responsiveness. Word spread and I started getting inquiries from other businesses looking for space. I hired a property manager, someone with experience who could handle the day-to-day while I focused on the bigger picture. I was still working my appraisal job, but nights and weekends were spent at the building. It didn't feel like work. It felt like building something that mattered. My brother stopped asking if I was okay. He could see it. I was better than okay. I started running into people I knew around town. Old coworkers, friends from college, people who'd known me and my wife as a couple. Most of them were awkward about it, asking vague questions about how I was doing, clearly uncomfortable. I kept it simple, told them I was good, that I was working on something new. One of them mentioned seeing my wife at a bar downtown with some guy from her office. I didn't react, didn't care. Whatever she was doing, it had nothing to do with me anymore. The divorce paperwork came through in the 6th month. No kids, no major assets left to split, just signatures and a sense of relief. I signed everything, sent it back, and moved on. Around that same time, I got a call from one of my tenants. They were expanding, needed more space, and wanted to know if I had anything available. I didn't, but I started looking at adjacent properties, seeing if there was room to grow. That's when I realized something. I wasn't just running a building. I was building a business, and I was good at it. One evening, I was at the building late, finishing up some paperwork in the small office I'd set up on the 1st floor. My phone rang, unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Connor? It was her. I didn't say anything. I need to talk to you. We don't have anything to talk about. Please, can we meet? Just for coffee or something? I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say no, hang up, be done with it. But another part of me was curious. Not because I wanted her back, but because I wanted to see if she'd finally figured out what she'd lost. Fine, I said. Tomorrow. 3 p.m. The coffee place on 5th. She agreed. I hung up. The next day I finished work early, stopped by the building to check on a repair, and then headed to the coffee shop. I got there first, ordered a black coffee, and sat by the window. She walked in 10 minutes later. She looked the same, put together, confident, the version of herself she showed the world. But there was something different in her eyes, something uncertain. She sat down across from me, didn't order anything. "Thanks for meeting me," she said. I nodded, didn't say anything. I wanted to apologize, really apologize. Not just for what I said that night, but for everything. The way I treated you, the way I made you feel. I was wrong. I listened, didn't interrupt. I've been thinking a lot about us, about what went wrong. And I realized that I pushed you away because I thought you weren't ambitious enough. But you were. You just did things differently than I did. She paused, waiting for me to respond. "Okay," I said. She leaned forward, her voice quieter now. "I heard you bought a building downtown." I did. That's really impressive, Connor. I mean it." I didn't say anything. "I was wrong about you, about a lot of things, and I know I don't deserve another chance, but you don't," I said. She blinked, sat back. "What? You don't deserve another chance? You're right about that." Her face shifted, something between hurt and anger. "So that's it? You're just going to shut me out? I'm going to move on, same thing I've been doing for the last 6 months. Connor, come on, we had 16 years together. That has to mean something. It did. Past tense. She stared at me, her jaw tight. You've changed. Yeah, I said. I have. She stood up, grabbed her purse. I hope you're happy with yourself. I am. She walked out without looking back. I finished my coffee, paid the bill, and left. I had work to do. That evening, I was back at the building when I saw her car pull up outside. I watched from the window as she got out, looked up at the 3-story structure, and stood there for a long moment. She didn't come in, just stared, like she was trying to process what she was seeing. One of my tenants walked past her on the way in, nodded politely. She didn't respond. I didn't go outside. Didn't need to. She was seeing exactly what I'd built without her, and that was enough. After a few minutes, she got back in her car and drove away. I turned back to my desk, back to the work that mattered now. The months that followed were some of the best I'd had in years. The building was running smoothly, generating solid income, and I'd started looking at a second property. My reputation in the local real estate community was growing, not because I was flashy, but because I was reliable, fair, and knew what I was doing. I ran into her one more time about a year after the divorce. I was at a restaurant downtown with some colleagues, celebrating closing a deal on another property. She was there with friends, spotted me across the room. I saw her look, saw the recognition, the hesitation. She didn't come over. I didn't expect her to. I heard through the grapevine that she'd left her job, started working somewhere else. Apparently things at the startup hadn't worked out the way she'd hoped. I didn't take any satisfaction in it. It just was. My life kept moving forward. I stayed close with my brother, reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with, started dating again. Nothing serious, just exploring what it meant to be myself without carrying someone else's expectations. I thought about her sometimes, about the years we spent together, about the version of myself I'd been back then. I didn't miss it. I didn't regret leaving. Looking back, the consequences she faced weren't something I engineered. They were natural. She built her life around ambition and image, and when those things didn't pan out the way she'd expected, she had to face the fact that she'd burned the one relationship that had been solid. She lost someone who would have been there through anything, and she realized it too late. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to prove to myself that I was capable of more than she ever believed. And I did. Some people spend their whole lives chasing validation from others, trying to prove they're strong enough, smart enough, exceptional enough. I used to be one of them. Not anymore.